What I like to do first and foremost is just take a moment to sit and ask my inner child, close my eyes, connect, ask, what do you want today? What do you need today? So the first things that come up, I try to honor that.
Welcome to the Spirits Beside Us podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lippincott. I'm an ex-Wall Street analyst turned international medium, spiritual teacher, and best-selling author. Each week we'll dive into the fascinating and uplifting arena of the non-physical world to help you deepen your understanding and spiritual connection to the unseen realm. We'll also share a behind-the-scenes look with others who've done the same and speak with experts in the field about their experiences. Pull up a seat and let's dive into these perspective-changing conversations. Well, welcome back again, everybody, to Spirits Beside Us. We've got another great guest with us. I'm so excited to have her on. Today, we've got Dawn Marino, and I'm so excited to have her on because she's a spiritual medium and a channeler, but also she's a certified crystal energy healer. So she goes about healing people's energy and the dark night of the soul, which we'll have to get into. She's also an intuitive tarot reader, energy-infused artist, which we'll also talk about, and definitely the author of 2 books on tarot, which I got to get into and pick your brain about that one. And Dawn's healings really focus on the dark night of the soul and kind of getting you through that energy depletion, the disconnection of self, and helps people reconnect themselves with their higher self and helps them to feel empowered again. So with that, Dawn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm so thrilled to hear everything that you're doing and everything that you're working with spirit and working with energy and helping people's energy. But I guess the first question I've got is, because you've got all these wonderful capabilities now, abilities to help people, what was your child like and your childhood really kind of like? Did you always have these abilities? Were you always working with spirit, always sensing energy? What happened?
Yeah, so I was born with the gift. When I was a child, I really didn't understand what was happening to me or the fact that I was seeing things and communicating. I had a childhood friend that I didn't realize until decades later was actually a spirit. I thought it was just a real kid on the playground. But I didn't understand fully. And as I grew older, I would ignore it, shut it out because it didn't seem real and nobody else was like this. And I didn't have any kind of validation. But more and more, I couldn't ignore the truth of who I was. So
exactly. Yeah. So it really sounds like everybody else, like, oh yeah, I got this imaginary play date. This person's fantastic. And then eventually you kind of went, wait a second, let's get a little more logical.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when did you pick up the connection with spirit later on? Was this more sort of in an adult situation? What happened then?
Yeah. In my 20s, I started to experience more and more things. My mother had actually passed away and a lot shifted after that. Energetically, my connection grew even stronger. But still I sort of shut it off because I still, I didn't understand really how to work with it. And I would see things that were a little scary or unsettling. But then, about a decade or so later, I was talking with a friend. I was having a lot of health issues. And she said, why is it so easy for you to talk about these really uncomfortable things that are happening to you, yet you can't admit to yourself that you're a medium? And I had not told her that, and it just blew me away. And I was like, this is really who I am. And then the more I started to open up to it, that's when everything shifted for me. And I started to really practice, be dedicated to it, and open up more and learn more about how to protect my energy and not see, scary things or anything of that nature. And it completely shifted everything once I finally accepted that I'm a medium.
Yeah. So it sounds like, like many people, you initially were afraid of that sort of Hollywood ghost story feeling of like, okay, if it's a spirit, it's got to be bad, right?
Yes.
Because the same thing happened to me. I remember when I was starting to open up to this, I'm like, oh, this can't be good.
Right,
Like, wait a
exactly.
second, are they going to come out and do bad things to me? It's like, oh God, no. I was
Right.
like, I was sitting in meditation with one eye open, looking around my room.
Exactly.
Oh wow!
Exactly.
So you mentioned something that's really interesting. You mentioned that your friend was able to tell you that you were a medium and was able to sense, hey, you're able to do all these things. Wake
Yeah.
up, smell the coffee. You are a medium.
Yeah.
It's interesting that somebody else was saying that because I've heard stories where somebody didn't know they were a medium until they went to a reading, and the reading says, "Why are you here? You're already a medium." Yet you went to a friend, and the friend said the same thing, not some
Exactly.
uber master medium.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think a lot of it too was a lot of people are not necessarily accepting of it. So it took me a long time to accept it
Mhm.
for myself, realizing that once I was more vocal and visible about who I am and my gift, that it could, turn a lot of people away. And so there was this whole part of finally being comfortable with actually owning this part of myself.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of the other thing. It's like, what was your family like initially? You said your mother had already passed, but were there already other family members who were sort of telling you, oh, these are things that we just don't talk about. These are things that are bad, or are they more open to it? What was sort of like your family and your culture and all that?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that my mother's side and my father's side, the women were all intuitive, but they never were vocal about it in life. It's
Hmm.
only now that in spirit that I connect with them in that capacity. So my family isn't extremely open about it. They're not closed off per se, but it's not something that's necessarily going to just come up in random conversation. Like my father is supportive, but I don't know how much he fully grasps what I do, and, I have family members who tell me there's no such thing as ghosts, things
Hmm.
like that. So while no one is, mean about it, so to speak, it's not exactly, dinner table topic either. So
Oh, come on, let's invite the spirit over to set up, let's look at a place setting for dinner.
exactly. Exactly.
Wow. Okay. So one of the interesting things that seems to be part of your journey has been this dark night of the soul and your own healing. So tell me about that. What was behind your dark night of the soul? What was it that got you into experiencing that, learning that, wanting to follow that road?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that I've had several big dark nights of the soul, but the first most biggest one, I had actually been working as a hairstylist in Manhattan, and I ended up with chemical poisoning from one of the products.
Hmm.
And yeah, and it completely changed my health, my life. And I was at this rock bottom. There was really nobody who could help me. Medically speaking, the doctors either didn't take it seriously or they just threw their hands up. They were at a loss, but I was very, very, very ill. And so I had to turn to more holistic methods and alternative methods of healing myself because nothing else was working. And I was in a very low place, very dark place. And a lot was shifting with my intuition at the same time. And it makes you question your mental state, your reality. But the more that I leaned into it, the more that I was able to feel empowered and
Hmm.
do what I needed to do to get myself through it. But everything felt very hopeless, very dark, very frustrating. It was very scary, a lot of uncertainty. And it changed my whole trajectory and put me onto this more spiritual path with my healing, the way I live, the way I connect to myself. but it was a very, very dark, uncomfortable time.
Hmm.
And then, about 5 years ago, I was thrown into another really deep, dark night where, my best friend passed away very suddenly, and all of these people I knew were no longer in my life. My intuition and my gift was expanding again, and my health was shifting again, and just so many things were happening at once, like physically, mentally, emotionally. And it was very hard to connect to myself, to ground into my body, let alone be grounded in general. It was a very big experience. I felt very disconnected. There was a lot of fear and anxiety that I had to work through to really come out of it. But it definitely would have me questioning my sanity with the aspect of our psychic gift and our mediumship. There was so much flooding me at once that it became very uncomfortable, and it took a while to really sift through and even everything out.
Hmm. So
Yeah.
what is a dark night of the soul? Is that something that can happen to anybody, or is that something only that happens to people with psychic gifts? What is a dark night of the soul?
Yeah, no, it can happen to anyone. It tends to happen a lot to people they might not know that they're very intuitive. As their gifts are opening up more, they become more open and more aware. It's when a person starts to become, it's almost as though your consciousness is raising a bit more. And so everything that you sort of took for granted in your life starts to shift. And so your perspective might change, your belief patterns. You might be going through some sort of crisis, either, physical or mental, and everything is just changing, and things that you always took, for granted or were constants suddenly change, and you might not recognize, yourself or your thoughts for a while because you're stepping outside of yourself. It's almost as though you're leveling up or upgrading, but in order to do that, you have to go through all of the uncomfortable things so that you can realign yourself to this next part of your journey, so to speak. I mean, it
Interesting.
can definitely happen to anyone, but I've noticed with clients, it tends to be more intense with people who are intuitive, who are psychic, and they might not even realize that they are, or they might be like I was, denying that they are. So
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting. So it almost sounds like the dark night of the soul could be something where you're getting rid of the old, bringing in the new. You have to, in order to progress and bring in that new, you got to sweep out the stuff that no longer serves you. Is that kind of a way to think about the dynamics of this?
That's incredibly accurate. Yes, that's a great way to put it. It's out with the old, in with the new, and it's not a comfortable or easy, effortless process.
Yeah, I guess I might liken it to almost like you've got to go through the valley of death to get to the other side of the peak, the other peak, that kind of a thing.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. Yes. And a lot of times my spirit team, they refer to it, when I'm going through it, as an initiation almost. And, you're
Hmm.
going through this. And then on the other side of it, though, you'll have so much more opened up to you, or you'll be able to reach out to other people going through this. So it's almost like a rite of passage on the journey.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Is this also something that you might, or perhaps a better way of saying it, is it also inclusive of traumatic things that happened in childhood as well? Sort of like healing the inner child?
Yes, inner child work is actually a big part of the work that I do as well.
Ah.
There's a lot of inner child healing traumas from childhood. A lot of times there might be things that we don't even realize or remember, but that energy or that emotion is still with us. So for myself and with clients, I show ways to work through that. You might not necessarily recognize the trauma or, what might have happened, but the emotion will keep coming up. So ways to work through it so that you can let it go. But yeah, I have found that inner child work is really important on this journey because there's that aspect of joy and that happiness that can sometimes be put on the back burner while you're sifting through all the adult things or the harder things. So it's important not to neglect that part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So how important would you say the aspect of joy is to our mental health, psychic health, intuitive health, our overall health?
Very important, very important. And for me, that's one of the things that I have struggled the most with on my journey. There were times where it's been very hard to find that and to connect to that. And so you kind of have to go back to basics and do the little things that light you up and make a commitment for it, make time for it, until it becomes more natural again. Because a lot of times when people go through these healing crises or these spiritual crises, the last thing on their mind is, well, I'm going to go get out a coloring book right now. Instead they're trying to just get through the day. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. But yeah,
yeah,
because it seems that, children, the reason they're so happy is that all they do is just play. They don't think to themselves, okay, well, I've got to go pay the bills. I got to go, take out the garbage. I got to do this. I got to do that. It's like they don't
yeah,
have any responsibilities. So their entire focus is play, joy. How can I experience more of this joy? And
yeah.
ideally, that would be sort of what we'd be doing more of, I guess.
Right.
Wow.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
What can we do to bring in more joy into our lives?
Yeah. So some of the things, what I like to do first and foremost is just take a moment to sit and ask my inner child, close my eyes, connect, ask, what do you want today? What do you need today? And, the first things that come up, I try to honor that as best as I can. Something simple as dancing, around the house for a few minutes or, maybe sketching or just doing something that makes you feel more alive, more playful, more in the flow. I find that with healing the inner child, a big part of it is allowing that part of you to be seen and to be heard. Because when we stifle that part of ourselves, it's almost as though you're re-wounding that part of you by ignoring, that part. So there's just connecting and asking, what do you want today? What do you need today? What can I do for you today?
Interesting. So so
Yeah.
it sounds like it's very much first getting in contact with your inner child, maybe by, thinking for a few minutes, meditating on it, contemplating, what it is, and then whatever, I guess, rises up or whatever you start to feel that you'd like to, you'd like to do. Because most
Yep.
of it, I think, to your point, most of us say, no, that's a silly, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a great saying in meditation that says, if you feel you don't have time for meditation, that's when you really need meditation.
Exactly. Exactly.
That sounds like the same thing
Exactly.
with joy. It's like, if you don't have enough time for joy, then you really need joy.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
Wow,
And I
that's
find that the more that, you are able to try and connect to that joy state, the easier things flow, like with your intuition and if you're trying to get more clarity, the more that you're in that joy, playful state, the easier it is for it to come to you as opposed to when you're so serious and so focused and trying so hard.
Is there a risk that we focus so much on joy that we lose contact with the here and now, or we are basically focusing on so much joy that we, go into an alternate reality and we lose ourselves? So how do we kind of get that balance?
Yeah, so that balance is really important because you also don't want to ignore everything and just say, everything's great. I'm so happy. It's so positive and just bury everything else. It's important to, stay in touch and stay connected, especially connecting with your body and how your body's feeling, what's your body saying, getting grounded into that. And when things arise, acknowledging them and facing them as opposed to just saying, happy 24/7. That's not going to work well either. You have to have that kind of balance so that you're rooted into both.
Interesting that you
Yeah.
use the word root, because suddenly that brings into work, the chakras, the energy healing. So maybe you can go into
Mhm.
the energy healing. Do you use the chakra energies you use crystals. So maybe you can talk about, the crystals and the chakras and how the energy, is within us.
Yeah, sure. I could talk about that all day.
Oh, great. Must be 2
Yeah.
episodes now.
Yeah. So a lot of times when I do the energy healing, I do focus on the chakras and the aura around the person. I like to work with the energy of crystals. When I'm working with a client, I will usually be guided to specific crystals for that person. Otherwise, I will go in with what I know about the crystal or intuitively, and I will send that energy because I also work remotely with clients. So I can, you just send it remotely, but I'll work with the energy of the crystal and I'll use several. I mean, sometimes there'll be, enough for each chakra depending on what the client needs. And I channel that energy of the crystal and send that out as well. And I work also with my guides and what I'm feeling for each person, sending them the healing that they need. I'll work through each chakra from the bottom up into their aura. And then also I'll be in a bit of a trance state. So any other healing, maybe from their spirit team or my spirit team, comes as well. And with it, I often include some like cord cutting if need be, some energetic protection, but I go through each chakra and go from there to kind of assess where they're at and how they're doing, what they most need, and work intuitively as well. So the sessions can be very intense, very powerful, but also very relaxing and purging at the same time.
Exactly. Wow.
Yeah.
Are there certain crystals that are aligned with certain chakras? Because I tend to think that you've got, based on, I don't know, perhaps the color or something of the crystal. Are there certain
Right.
crystals that go together with certain chakras?
Yeah, actually they do. And often it is kind of color matched. So some of the more red crystals or darker crystals are more for the root. Carnelian is good for the sacral, since that's like more of an orange color. Solar plexus, citrine is a yellow crystal. But what's interesting too is for the heart, there's green aventurine, but you can also use rose quartz and going up, even though a lot of crystals can correspond to the chakras, especially based on the color, I find that I will use a crystal not typically associated with that chakra on a chakra because of the energy of it or the frequency of it and what the person needs. I will kind of mix it up a bit, and do that way too. And it can be pretty powerful. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by crystals. I think I look at a crystal and say to myself, oh, okay, well that looks interesting. I think I know where that goes, but then I just kind of like go, that's it. But
Right,
you're the
right.
one who goes, oh, look at this crystal. Look at all the things we can do with it.
Yes. Yeah.
You mentioned your spirit team and your guides. What do you do with your mediumship? Let's talk about your mediumship. How
Yeah.
have you developed your mediumship? How have you been in contact with spirits to connect the spirit family with a recipient? Maybe you can talk us through that.
Yeah, sure. It's funny. I started strengthening my mediumship with tarot cards. I would try and do mediumship readings with the cards when I was, trying to really strengthen it and understand how my gift worked, because it took me a while to understand that our gifts aren't necessarily like what you see in the movies or the same as one of my friends. Maybe they hear it very well, whereas I don't. And so it took me a while to feel comfortable with the different ways that I receive messages. And so I strengthened it through tarot and also practicing channeling messages from crystals. But when I am sitting with a client and I open myself up, a lot of times their loved ones in spirit will come forward and they will present themselves as like a sitcom character at first or a movie character so that I can get a feel for their personality and what they're like. And I have found through sitting with spirit and practicing more that my ancestors come through a lot more. My mom in spirit, both of my grandmothers in spirit, and like a long line of them, they will come through a lot during my readings as well, and kind of just hang out and and sort of help with delivering of the messages. So it's a very unique way that I receive the different messages, but I try and strengthen it by sitting with my loved ones in spirit as well, with my ancestors regularly, to strengthen that connection, strengthen my gift, strengthen the way that I receive. And the more inner work that I do, the more I tend to open up as well. So
Interesting.
yeah.
What maybe you can kind of describe for us, what it feels like for you, maybe kind of put us in your shoes when you're going into a reading. What does it feel like? What are some of the experiences you have? How do you feel when you connect? What are you sensing, feeling, detecting, etc.?
Yeah. So when I first connect, it's almost as though I feel as though I'm in a different space at first in a moment. And as the spirit comes forward, I'm sort of flooded with a lot of different sensations, feelings, sometimes taste or smell as well. And I have found that my relationship with the people who come through in spirit, I often enjoy it very much. I tend to find that they have a sense of humor, and I almost approach it in like a conversation, and it ends up being very funny at times, like in my head with the interaction, because they're just like us, except they're in spirit. So they'll be kind of joking and laughing, and but I'm also trying to balance it with the sitter, because if they're, not in a humor state and they're very sad, I kind of try to match that. But there are times too when the spirit will evoke an emotion, and I'll be overcome with sadness or grief, or, whatever they're trying to convey, or the way that they try and express their love for the sitter. Sometimes I'll be just overcome and overwhelmed with the emotion that they're trying to put forward. So it ends up being almost a mix of humor, seriousness, some sadness, some happiness, sad tears, happy tears for the sitter, as all the different messages come through. I have found that a lot of times when I'm sitting with a client, the spirits that come forward, they're almost impatient. They don't want to do a lot of the evidential kind of, this is what I did. This is how I passed. This is what my house looked like. They just want to get right into the conversation, right into the memory. And some of them are a little impatient, and it's funny. So it's very interesting. And sometimes too, I'll work with like colors. They'll show me colors, and they sort of correspond to, different meanings as well. And it's just very interesting, the different ways that they present the information to me. But I always enjoy reading for people so much, because I just love the conversation with the spirit, as well as being able to give that message, that connection to the sitter.
What's so interesting is that you mentioned the sense of humor and the strong emotions, and the same thing happens to me when I'm giving a reading. But the way you described it was so perfect that it's I don't want to say raw emotion, but much stronger emotion that we might normally feel in the physical. Much stronger sense of humor. So all the feelings and the senses are that much more accentuated, perhaps is a better way of saying it. I mean, I can remember there was one reading I once gave where the guy who was coming through was trying to show me his personality. And the very first thing he does to me, he comes up to me with a beer mug and goes, "Hey, you want a beer?" I'm like, "What?" And that was his whole personality. And he just kept on going like that. I'm like, wow, okay. And I was just like chuckling and laughing, and he's just going on and on. So when they bring through their personality, it's 150% of what it was, so that and you bring that through them, to the recipient. And the recipient's like, oh my gosh, wow. So it's cool. It's like they're bowled over. So
exactly.
That's great. One thing that you touched on was their happiness, their pleasure, their sense of humor. And as soon as you were saying that, this word joy went back into my head, and I wanted to connect that sense of joy that they have with the joy they're trying to bring through to the recipient, which is exactly what you're trying to do through the dark night of the soul, to bring through that joy. It sounds like there's this coincident or synchronous effort to bring joy to everybody else. Am I reading too much into that?
No, it's so true. It's so true. There's so much synchronicity with all of that. Exactly. And so often it always kind of comes back to that joy and that happiness. Absolutely. And that playfulness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's Spirit seems to want to have us learn to live life filled with joy, live our life to the fullest, and have our lives, meant to be completely, full of life. And that's what they're always bringing through, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I always get this big message of surrendering. Just surrender. You don't have to try and figure everything out or try and, make everything so perfect. Just surrender and let that, kind of flow come, which is much easier said than done, but.
Right. Exactly. Wow. Interesting. So you also work with energy-infused art. Tell me about that. What is energy-infused art? Do you just close your eyes and the energy takes you away, or what are you doing?
Yes. So I do have a background in art. And what I love to do though is I will get out, I have a whole box of different art supplies, paints, oil pastels, markers, and I will tap in and kind of connect. And if I'm doing it just for myself or for like a collective, then, usually whatever flows, or I'll set an intention. Or if I'm doing it for a client, I will have their healing or their intention in mind. And so I will sort of sit with my spirit team and, say, this is what, we're trying to do. And I'll open up and go into a trance state and just create the art in a trance state. But also while I'm doing it, there's energy flowing with the intention. So if it's, for joy, so to speak, it'll be infused with that. And when I'm done with the art, I'll usually put some specific crystals over it for a little while and sit with it and put my hands over it and infuse it with that energy. So this piece of art holds this energy indefinitely. And people can then use that to meditate with, or to just have it near them, or to view it. And it contains that healing energy that they had most needed at the time.
Wow. So the paint itself becomes infused with the energy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And even if I take an image of it, I set the intention that, may the image also hold this energy so people can view it and receive that.
Interesting. So, it sounds like you've got some, background in art. Do you also do spirit art where, you'll connect with spirit and start drawing, the loved ones of spirit?
It's something that I have been contemplating.
Oh.
I don't do it yet, but it's not out of question. It's something that I have actually been contemplating.
Yeah, it sounds like that's another, stone on the path, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Great. Well, talk to me about tarot cards, because I'm always fascinated by tarot cards. Some people say, oh, it's just a bunch of cards with a lot of, fancy artwork on it. Other people say, oh, I swear by tarot cards. What are tarot cards? Why are they so interesting? Why can some people connect with them? Why is it difficult for others to even fathom what's on it? What's the mystery behind tarot cards?
Yeah. So I really love working with tarot. I love incorporating them with my reading. I work with them for myself regularly. I do a daily check-in. Tarot cards are very structured. They represent different archetypes of people, of personalities, and they also represent different emotions, different situations. And so they essentially can tell a story of where you're at, where you're headed, where you've been by working with the cards. I like to work with the cards for inner healing, some shadow work, emotional healing, journaling. I'll use it in that sense, not in a sense where I'm, predicting the future or anything. The cards are a really great tool for your emotional health and working in that way. And it also can help with your intuition. There are some cards that, with tarot, they all have a general meaning, but then when you work with them intuitively, that can expand. But there's a few cards that my guides have designated with very specific meanings just for me. So when I'm doing a reading and that card comes up, I know that it means something completely different than the intended message. But I think that one of the reasons people might have a hard time connecting to tarot is because they might be overthinking it, or it might feel very overwhelming. Because I do teach how to read tarot, and I find that students in the beginning are very flustered, very overwhelmed. But then once you break it down and show them, what each suite represents, what this represents, and the more you work with it, the more it can kind of click and flow and make sense.
Yeah, that sounds. I think I've heard that a couple of times. That you don't have to memorize the meaning of every single card, because otherwise, you do that, it's like you've lost the meaning. You'll be overwhelmed. Because I can remember getting these printing out these cheat sheets of like what every suit meant, what every face meant, what every I don't even remember what's on tarot cards anymore. But
Right.
I was like, going, how can anybody remember all of this stuff? This is insane. I was like, forget it. I can't even try anymore. I'm like,
Right.
oh yes, this card feels great. What did it mean? I don't know. I said, okay, that's not for me. So yeah, I think to what you were talking about previously, it's kind of like, to some people, they'll be drawn to it and it'll feel right. To other people, it's not their thing. It's like, we're drawn to a certain tool, or we're a certain, aid. And, some people that might work, to other people it might not work. You got to find what works.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not for everyone. It doesn't resonate for everyone, but I do find for me, it's a great tool. And for me, it helps me really connect to myself as well. Just going within and really assessing, where I am each day.
You mentioned shadow work, and I've often heard that. What is shadow work, and how do you work with it? How do you heal
it? Yeah. So basically, it's about going in and facing the parts of yourself that, might not be your most flattering aspects.
You mean like everything that we look at and say, okay, well, I completely just, I'm a horrible person.
Yeah, essentially those kinds of things, or, emotions that you might be holding on to, or old patterns or old beliefs or old like cycles that you keep repeating. It's about taking a look at the things that might need shifting, might need letting go, might need healing, might need exploring. But it's also about meeting these parts of you that you might not be thrilled with, and learning to accept them as well, and not holding yourself in so much judgment and so much criticism of yourself. It's about self-love essentially, and working more with all the parts of you, not just all the happy, good parts of you.
They should rename that self-love, not shadow work, like learning to love yourself, because the nomenclature of that just kind of completely, puts it in sort of like in the dustbin. You're like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with my shadow self. I want to deal with learning how to love myself. That sounds a lot more appealing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and it's not pretty. It's not fun. There's usually a lot of crying and sitting with things. But once you work on something, then you feel a little bit freer. You feel more free, more open, more accepting. It's about not burying everything. It's about taking all the stuff that you've buried and bringing it up to the light.
Boy, that's a psychologist's dream.
Yes.
You do that, you'll put a psychologist out of business.
Exactly.
Now, are shadow work and dark night of the soul, are they the same thing? Are they related? How are they different?
They kind of go hand in hand, because, well, when you're going through the dark night of the soul, you might not be wanting to do that shadow work because you're already feeling pretty low. So it's more as for me, I find as you're coming out of it, when you feel okay enough, then yes, you do want to kind of explore those lower places that you're in, those lower emotions, and face them and confront them so that you can sort of shift up out of it with more grace.
Mm.
But I always encourage people to be feeling in a safe enough space emotionally before they do that. Because when you're already feeling really overwhelmed and not yourself, it can be difficult to bring up such big things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
It seems that spirit's always trying to raise our vibration. Do you feel that by doing the shadow work and trying to remove all these negative judgments we have about ourselves, these negative feelings that we've buried, that's going to remove the lower vibration and help us begin to raise our vibration in the process?
Yeah, definitely. It helps you kind of shift and raise yourself up a bit. It helps you feel more aligned with your higher self, with your true self. You feel more authentic to who you are the more that you let go of the baggage and the things that you don't need anymore. It helps free you and raise your vibration. Yes.
Hmm. So it sounds like you're, like the old phrase, release the energy that no longer serves you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Got it.
Absolutely.
Got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
put these pieces together that it's like I've heard all these disparate phrases. I'm thinking to myself, okay, that one sounds a lot like this. It's
Yeah.
starting to like piece the puzzle together, and clearly
Yeah.
and I've heard the phrase the matrix so many times. You start to see
Right.
these things come together, and sure enough, it's pretty close to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like a recalibration, you're recalibrating and then
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. So you've mentioned our higher selves several times. What do you feel our higher self really is?
Yeah, so for me, I feel as though the higher self is the part of you it's almost like that part of you that's still in the ether, yet still with you. It's like the highest, most true, most aligned part of you that helps guide you in your life, in the way that you go, because that part of you already sort of sees and knows, who you are, what you're about, where you want to be headed. And so that's why when I connect to anything, first and foremost, I like to connect to my higher self. It's almost like the biggest essence of your soul, like the
Mhm.
highest essence of your soul, of who you are. And so a lot of times when people are going through a dark night or spiritual crisis, they feel very disconnected from their higher self, from their self. They don't feel themselves at all. In fact, they might not feel much of anything. So it's about getting realigned so that you feel that spark again, that fire, that part of you that is sometimes hidden underneath everything else.
So what is the difference between a soul and a higher soul, or is the higher self the soul? What do you think?
Yeah, so it's so interesting that you ask that, because it's something that I kind of contemplate and mull over a lot. But the impression that I have is that, the soul is it, your soul is your soul, it's your part of you. But the higher self is almost like the highest part of your soul in a sense. It's like as though it's your soul, but even more evolved, almost as though it's still connected, but the most evolved part of you.
Do you think that the highest part of you, the highest self, the uber soul, is what might be referred to as source, or is it not there yet?
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that, because I just feel like there's this connection with source when it comes to the higher self. And that's something too that I often think about a lot, because it feels as though when I connect to the higher self, it's as though you're connecting to something much more aligned, so to speak, in that sense. So I can equate it to source, or at least very close to source.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because I've also heard the term soul and oversoul. So I wonder, okay, yeah, are there different levels of soul? You've got the higher self, you got the soul, you got the oversoul. So I mean, it's like how many layers? I'd love to
Right.
sit down on a chair one to one and interview a spirit right here in live. and ask, so tell us, what are the different levels of soul?
Exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be possible one day, but not right now. At least not with me. I don't know. I'm sure somebody can.
Right.
Well, you mentioned that you do trance work. So how long have you been doing trance work?
It's interesting. Trance I've been doing for about, I would say maybe a year and a half to 2 years, like more seriously. I had met some spiritual friends who were also interested, and we would work together and meet regularly and just connect and practice. And we were very, we would take notes and observations and, take turns. And so I find I really enjoy going into a trance state, especially with the healings that I do. But it is something that it's only been in the last few years that I've really been taking it, very seriously and really diving into it. So, but I really like the depth that it adds. And I enjoy going into a trance state for my own healing, my own inner healing, and connecting as well to different guides and loved ones in spirit in a trance state as well.
Interesting. So when you go into a trance state, again, maybe you could take us through what it feels like for you, put us in your shoes when you go into trance.
Yeah, absolutely. When I go into trance, first and foremost, before I go into trance, I sit, I clear my energy, I ground myself, I make sure that I'm feeling really energetically protected and connected. And I have created a space in my mind's eye that I like to go to, so to speak, when I go to trance. So I open myself up and then kind of walk, so to speak, to that place in my mind's eye. And then usually there'll be different spirits, loved ones and spirits waiting for me in this room. And then I go out onto a bridge that I created, and I have it sort of decorated in my mind's eye. And when I'm on the bridge, I will connect with whatever spirit is wanting to connect with me at that time, and essentially merge with the energy of this spirit. And they sort of move through you. But for me, I have noticed that the more I practice, the better it gets, because I have found that the spirit has trouble when there's blockages and stuck energy or physical areas of tension. It's almost as though it makes it a lot harder to merge, and it actually can become physically uncomfortable for me as well. And so the more work I do on myself and the more that I practice, the more that it lessens it up and allows it to flow better.
So when you're in a trance state, what are you doing? Are you bringing through a guide who's speaking to a recipient? Are you bringing through healing, or all of the above?
Both. It's interesting for me. I have found that I often go in with the intention of, the guide bringing through a message, yet they always, surprise me and switch it up on me. And it's often me bringing healing to the person in a trance state. And so I've got to experience and learn these interesting, techniques with the energy, and they'll sort of work through me, bringing healing to the sitter. And I actually really enjoy that. I find that to be really fascinating. I often go in with the intention of, well, I'll just be delivering these messages, but instead they're like, no, this is a healing.
Well, I think they've found their healer, so they're like, all right, Dawn is going to be our healer in person, and we're going to use her as the healing. So let's just dive right in, and we're going to do a healing. Forget this fluff about talking and messages. We can go past that. We don't need that.
Exactly. That's pretty much what happens every time. So
are you able to sense different guides who come back on a regular basis, or who are you working with?
Yeah. It's interesting. A lot of times, I don't know if you're familiar with Hecate. She was a goddess who actually works with people going through the dark night or past life healing.
Oh.
She often shows up a lot when I go into trance, because there's usually past life healing issues that the person needs assistance with. And so she often shows up on my trance bridge. But a lot of times it's my mother in spirit, my grandmother's in spirit. animal guides that I have. I have a few specific animal spirit guides that come a lot onto the bridge in trance. There's a bunch of different ones. Sometimes my inner child will be there because the person needs more inner child kind of healing. So there's different ones that pop up.
Sounds like your
Yeah.
joy guide is there with their toys, ready to bring the toys to the recipient.
Exactly.
Come on, let's go play.
Exactly.
I got my Hot Wheels set all lined up. Let's go.
Exactly.
Wow. So you mentioned you've got some animal guides. Are these animal totems, or are they the same thing, or what?
Well, so it's interesting when inner child work needs to happen. There's actually a unicorn guide that shows up a lot, and I notice whenever I have like a medical appointment for myself, the unicorn guide always shows up there. And I think it's to bring more of that like joy and, less tension.
Wow.
The other spirit guide that I have is actually a hornet, because I actually have a horrible hornet phobia, and ironically my animal guide
Good reason.
Exactly. And ironically my spirit animal guide is a hornet, which always makes it very interesting when this happens and comes up. But there's this big, spiritual element at play that I've been sort of working through with that connection. And the other guide is an eagle. For some reason, when I go into trance state and do that work, the eagle guide comes up a lot. So, yeah.
From what I understand, the eagle is supposed to represent, both a majesty, but also a great view over a long distance. So you're able to see things even farther out and have greater visibility almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, what is it that you would say would be perhaps the most important recommendation that you would have to a listener today if you were to give one?
I would have to say to not dim your light or doubt yourself, especially not just in life, but if you are wanting to connect to spirit, or you think that, maybe your loved one is reaching out to you, to not doubt yourself, because a lot of times we know so much more than we give ourselves credit for. So just trust your knowing, trust yourself, trust what you know. And also don't, make yourself small to make other people comfortable. Just, be yourself, shine your light, know that you know what you're talking about.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, Dawn, where can our listeners get in contact with you? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Sure. On my website, healbydawn.com, you can reach out to me that way. There's a contact form. And also my Instagram and YouTube is Heal by Dawn as well.
Yeah, great. Well, wonderful. Dawn, thank you so much for being on the show today. Loved having you.
Thank you for having me. It was great. It was fun.
Well, wonderful. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for another podcast episode today. And we had this wonderful guest. And if you like these episodes and you like the content, definitely please, rate and review. That way other listeners will be able to hear more of the content that you like, and they'll learn more about the podcast. So with that, you'll see all of the information from Dawn and everything about the episode today on the show notes. So if you have any questions, reach out. If you have any topics you'd like to hear, please let me know. Just go on to spiritsbesideus.com and we'll have all that. You can drop that into the requests. So for now, this is Chris Lippincott signing off, sending you love and light, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Spirits Beside Us. Make sure you head over to the show notes for all the links and information on this week's episode. You can check it out at spiritsbesideus.com. If you love this episode as much as I did, head over to rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're looking for a community of spiritual seekers like yourself, make sure you join my Facebook page, Spirits Beside Us Podcast on Facebook. This is Chris signing off, sending you love and light. I can't wait to connect with you again on Wednesday.